welcome to Nancy Drew Book Reviews. Today I'm reviewing Murder on Ice. A bit of background information: this is the third book in the Nancy Drew Files series. It was published in September 1986, 1 month after the first two books. Joe Cellini was the artist for all three of the books. He stopped drawing for the series after this, but they kept the same basic cover formula that Joe invented. The cover has Nancy Drew in the foreground, a sexy man standing behind her, and usually there's some danger or mystery to make things exciting. Speaking of formulas, I'm starting to see a romance pattern in the series so far. In Book 1, Nancy fell in love with the handsome guy who, shock and surprise, was working with the criminals. In Book 2, Bess fell in love with a handsome guy who, shock and surprise, was working with criminals. Now that we're on Book 3, it is George's turn for some loving. Gee, I wonder if the hot ski instructor she likes will be involved with criminals. The book begins with Nancy in the car with her two best friends, Bess and George, as well as her boyfriend, Ned. The four of them are having a ski vacation in Vermont at the Webb Cove Lodge. The owner of the lodge learns that Nancy is a detective and asks to speak with her in private. Last week, at 2 a.m. in the morning, there was a faceless prowler at the window. Ah! The prowler is a man with blonde hair and blue eyes. He returned yesterday night and tried to break into the kitchen. Either somebody likes midnight snacks, or we've got a potential criminal on our hands. Nancy promises to help investigate, then she goes outside and meets Luke Erickson, the ski instructor. Luke doesn't like talking to people, and he tells Nancy that she can't go skiing because he's repairing the chairlift. Nancy is forced to use his rope tow to get up the mountain. Partway there, the rope breaks, Nancy is thrown at a tree, and she is knocked unconscious. Wow, that didn't take long for Nancy to be attacked. When she wakes up, Luke is hovering over her, along with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed mystery man. Nancy passes out again, and when she wakes up, only Luke is there. He takes her back to the lodge to her worried friends. George looks at Luke, and she instantly falls in love with him. Yes, that's right, George falls head over heels for his good looks after seeing him for, 2 seconds? I don't believe this. Why would George have a crush on a ski instructor? That's not... Oh, now it makes sense. Nancy fills everyone in on the case, and she talks about the mystery man. Since George loves Luke, she is furious that Nancy is indirectly making him look bad. She attacks Nancy verbally, then she leaves in a big huff. You know, because your lifelong best friend almost dying isn't as important as believing in the hot guy who's never directly spoken to you. Well, since Luke is literally the only suspect, Nancy and Ned decide to keep an eye on him. Luke is giving George a private skiing lesson. Nancy reminds the readers that Ned is using Luke's ski equipment, and the two of them race down Bobcat Trail. Ned's boot unexpectedly comes loose, and he crashes, severely injuring his ankle. Luke starts shouting at Nancy because this is the second time in a row she's been involved in a near-fatal skiing accident. Nancy says it was not her fault, and she's right. A brief examination of the skis shows that they were sabotaged. At dinner, everyone talks, and they try to get some information out of Luke. Luke tenses up when the Olympics are mentioned, and he storms off because Nancy is being too nosy. George tells Nancy to stop playing detective for once, and she goes after Luke because, oh my gosh, Daddy, I love him, he's so cute! The next chapter, Luke interferes with Nancy's investigation by preventing her from examining the broken skis and the broken rope tow. Nancy tries having a heart-to-heart with George, but George is a little closed off. It's obvious George knows something important about Luke's past, but she refuses to tell Nancy what it is. Even though Ned has a hurt ankle, the group decides to go dancing that night. At the dance, Nancy bumps into the blonde-haired, blue-eyed mystery man who helped save her life. His name is Michael Price, and he confesses that he has a bad history with Luke. Several years ago, Luke loaned faulty ski equipment to a mutual friend, Dieter Mueller. Dieter got into an accident, slipped into a coma, and died. Nancy's car isn't working for whatever reason, so Nancy and Ned have to borrow Luke's Jeep. Too late, they realize that someone has cut the brake line. Since the exact same thing happened in last month's Nancy Drew book, Nancy knows what to do. She makes a tough turn, goes onto an uphill road, and crashes the car on purpose. After this, a blizzard strikes, so everyone is going to be stuck at the lodge. Michael is staying at a different hotel, but because he's important to the plot, he will occasionally stop by to deliver supplies. Michael warns George to stay away from Luke, and she gets furious with him because OMG, Luke is so cute! George accidentally lets it slip that Luke's big secret happened at the Olympic trials. Later, Nancy walks in on George and Luke making out. Awkward. Next is an investigation chapter where Nancy puts actual effort into solving the mystery. She looks up information about the Olympic trials, and it turns out that Luke's real name is John Bernstein. He challenged Dieter to a dangerous night race. They both crashed during the race. Dieter died, as we know. Luke got a concussion and amnesia. That is Luke's big secret. But instead of talking about the murder on ice, let's talk about George for a moment. Later on, the book reveals that George knew Luke's secret the entire time. Because she's a fan of the Olympic ski trials, she was able to recognize Luke even though he's using a fake name. So this means, even at the very beginning, when Nancy almost died, George knew Luke had a history of murder. So why didn't she say anything about this to Nancy? Because Luke is cute. Right. George is willing to let her friend die for the sake of a cute guy. Can I end the review here? 0 out of 10 for a horrible premise? Oh fine, let's keep going. At this point you don't even need to read the rest of the book. You can solve the mystery yourself. Obviously, Michael is trying to kill Luke in revenge for the death at the Olympic trials. This is obvious because Michael has a public grudge against Luke. He fits the description of the Prowler, and he always happens to be around during the fatal accidents. Also, there aren't any other suspects, so he has to be the culprit by default. Nancy accidentally puts on her stupid cap instead of her skiing cap, so she hasn't solved the mystery. She follows after Luke and thwarts another attempt to kill him. Then at 8:30 that night, George goes outside to meet Luke at the ledge. You know, because skiing by the cliffside in the middle of the night during a blizzard isn't dangerous at all. Nancy and Ned follow after George. An unknown man appears and tries to kill George. Nancy and Ned join in the fight and save George's life. The next day, Luke is on a trail to go get help when the culprit sets off a bomb and starts an avalanche. Geez, bombs and avalanches? Talk about overkill. Or should I say underkill, because Luke is still alive, he's just buried in the snow. You know, this is the 6th time that the culprit has unsuccessfully tried to kill someone. I think Nancy can rest easy now. This murderer is far too incompetent to actually kill anyone. Michael realizes his own incompetence at this point, so he gives up on trying to hide anything. While Nancy and Michael go to get help, Nancy starts pitching and Michael goes to bat. He is happy that Luke could die. Strike 1. He knows way more information than he should. Strike 2. He drops the bomb remote right in front of Nancy. Strike 3. You're out! Nancy tries to escape, but Michael catches up to her at the ledge and explains everything. It all started at the Olympic trials. Luke made the US Olympic team, and Michael was assigned as the runner-up because he's incompetent. When he heard about Luke's private race with Dieter, Michael saw an opportunity to put 2 competitors out of the running. Because he's incompetent, Michael sabotaged the wrong pair of skis, which led to Dieter's death. When Luke stopped to help Dieter, Michael snuck up on him and killed him by smashing him in the head with a rock. However, Michael is incompetent, so Luke survived the attempted murder with minor amnesia. Luke has recently started to regain his memory, which is really something that should have been mentioned earlier. So Michael has been trying to kill Luke ever since. Michael tries to kill Nancy at this point, but he's incompetent, so she gets him in a chokehold with her ski pole and knocks him unconscious. Everything is wrapped up after that. Michael is arrested, George apologizes for lying to Nancy and endangering her life for no real reason, and as an added bonus, Luke gets his memory back thanks to the avalanche. That's right, the avalanche cured his amnesia. He apologizes for being a jerk for the entire book and explains that he had to act suspicious, otherwise the book wouldn't be as interesting. Oh, and for those of you who are wondering, here are Michael's lifetime statistics as a murderer. The end. Post-book follow-up. I'll give this book credit for trying something different. Instead of focusing on a mystery, the majority of the book centers around Luke, the man with an unknown past. It's a good premise, but the execution isn't very good, and Luke is far too mean to be intriguing. The storyline with George Fane is an utter train wreck. George is completely out of character for the entire book. The real George Fane would never consider Nancy Drew's life less important than a cute guy she's never spoken to. Instead of acting like herself, George acts like an angry 4-year-old. She constantly shouts at Nancy and storms off to spend more time with Lukey Poo. This is especially egregious considering the previous book where George supported cases over crushes. Nancy's friend Bess hovers around in the background for most of the book, and while her material is okay, I can't help but think she should have had somehow been involved with George's storyline. The best part of the book is the relationship between Nancy and her boyfriend Ned. The two of them are together for the majority of the time, and they play off each other nicely. It's a shame the author put absolutely no effort in developing George and Luke's relationship, because otherwise it would have been slightly believable. The solution to the mystery is so obvious that Nancy comes off as slightly dim for not seeing it herself. In fact, she never solves the mystery. The culprit just gives himself away for no real reason. But even if the setup was bad and the culprit is utterly forgettable, the revelation of what really happened at the Olympic trials was well done, so a point for that. Since this is book number 3 in the series, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I can only hope that the next book does not involve one of Nancy's friends breaking character and putting romance ahead of everything else.